What is your occupation at Area 51?
I won't answer that. I have had reason to be present at Area 51, but I'm not going to clarify whether or not I was there as an employee.
Are you saying you were there as a visitor?
I'm not going to specify why or in what capacity I was there, only that I was there.
Can you tell us how many times you were there?
When I agreed to this, my fundamental ground rule was that I would not be asked to divulge personal data that might help pinpoint my identity. If you continue to ask questions that are out of bounds, I won't hesitate to terminate this interview.
Are you saying that the number of times you were present at Area 51 is enough to pinpoint your identity?
Any specifics will narrow the field of suspects. Of course, I could lie. Let's say I've been there 47 times, or anyway more than once.
Let's turn to the tape itself. The copy you've supplied is not the original tape.
No.
Was the original at Area 51 when you copied it?
That's out of bounds.
Is it fair to assume that the copying of tapes at Area 51 is heavily restricted?
You can assume anything you like. I would say that's a fair assumption. That's obvious. I will say that this tape was copied under special circumstances. Otherwise, copying it would have been impossible.
Can you be more specific?
More specific? Okay, I'm sure they've figured this much out already. Recently, there was a wholesale transfer of video documentation from analog tape to digital disk storage. In a couple of instances, this allowed data to leak from a highest security system to a less high security system. Even so, this particular tape was the only... I think that's about all I'll say about that.
Was there something about this particular clip that made it more accessible to be copied?
Not necessarily, no.
Was there something about the content that caused them to file it differently or give it special handling?
This interview was terminated.
The interview resumed only after a discussion of the ground rules.
Have you personally seen the alien being that appears in the tape?
Yes, I have, but I stress I was not necessarily present at the interview session that appears on the tape. I'm not going to be specific. I may have encountered the being at another time.
What can you tell us about the alien interview we're about to see?
This one is rather recent, very late in the series. The interview process has been ongoing since the being arrived, which was in 1989. Approximately twice a month, they sit it down for a session that generally lasts from 3 to 5 hours. If they try to go longer than that, or if they schedule the sessions more frequently, the being becomes unresponsive. There's a fair amount of infighting among the scientists from different disciplines to get their questions asked.
What has the alien revealed?
Various minor technical details of the saucers. The physicists and engineers are frankly frustrated. They feel the being is withholding information. Possibly concepts are getting lost because all the information has to come through a telepath. But also it may be that the bulk of their scientific knowledge is just too advanced to be translated into our primitive conceptual framework. It's analogous to if a human scientist were to try to translate quantum mechanics into the grunts and screeches of a chimpanzee.
That's not a very flattering comparison.
Frankly, there's a high attrition rate for scientists in the program. You'd think they'd be energized by the challenge. But a lot of them take the ego deflation very hard when they find out not only how much they don't know, but how much they aren't even capable of understanding.
What else has the alien communicated?
Oddly enough, the being seems to have a much easier time communicating spiritual concepts. And let me just state here publicly, to head off any clever ideas anyone might be having, I have never been, am not now, and never will be suicidal.
But how would the public know if something happened to you since we don't know who you are?
I'm taking care of that, trust me. If something happens to me, if I die, people will know who I am.
Do you think it's a reassuring sign that these aliens can communicate with us on a spiritual plane?
It would be nice to think so, but I'm not sure if it's really such an achievement considering the mismatch between our intellects. I mean, you're not going to have much luck making your dog understand calculus. But if you pet him on the head and say, "Good dog," aren't you communicating spiritually? And doesn't the animal control officer say, "Good dog," when he comes to put some poor stray to sleep? Doesn't the vet try to reassure the animal just before he spays it? When you're dealing with beings whose intellect is so far beyond your own, I don't think it's safe to assume they have your best interests at heart.
What about the content of the tape segment you brought?
As I said, this is late in the series. In fact, it's quite close to the end.
Because of his unwillingness to reveal his own identity, Victor's story stands or falls on the credibility of the tape he supplied. Here, exclusively for the first time anywhere, is the uncut, uninterrupted alien interview tape, shown in its entirety in real time.
You removed the soundtrack from the tape before you turned it over to this program.
That's correct. I can't allow the voices of the project personnel to be heard by the general public. There's a very good chance their family or friends on the outside might recognize them.
Is it your purpose in releasing this tape to expose Area 51 to the world?
My purpose is to expose the existence of the aliens, not compromise these individuals. I made the decision to come forward. I'm taking precautions to protect my own identity, and I don't think it's fair for me to put these others in danger of exposure. In any case, the interview on the tape went nowhere. It was interrupted, as you'll see.
Can you describe for us what we're seeing?
All right, we're looking at the interview suite at S4. It's kept dark for the comfort of the aliens. The figure who is just barely visible in the left foreground is the telepath, and behind the camera is a raked seating area for observers. Although in this case, I believe the only other person present was a military aide. The alien is seated behind a glass partition in a biocontainment area, which is maintained at Biosafety Level 2, the lowest designation. That's primarily for the protection of the aliens, not us. The theory is that if they were going to infect us with an alien bug, it would have happened 50 years ago. In fact, all the indications are the aliens eliminated microbial and viral life from their own ecosystem long ago. They aren't susceptible to our diseases directly, but it has been shown that microbes can reproduce and form colonies within their respiratory systems, which tends to exacerbate the debilities they seem to suffer anyway in our environment. In fact, you can see here the alien is beginning to flag. The interview was not going well. The telepath was trying to clarify some points from a previous interview, but he wasn't receiving coherent responses. As you can see, the being is in real distress. At this point, the telepath is sending out a message to the medical staff. He's trying to communicate with the alien, but he's getting no response. There's very little he can do. There's no direct connection between his space and the biocontainment area. That's the aide stepping in on the right. The medical staff should be there by now. They're slow in responding. There they are. I have to say the medical personnel at S4 are less than first rate. They tend to be selected for their willingness to keep secrets rather than their medical competence. By the way, he's not shining that light into the eyes. It looks that way, but in fact he's checking for hemorrhaging around the eye sockets and in the nasal cavity. I'm sorry. It's very hard for me to watch this.
If the government has really been in contact with superior aliens, wouldn't we see some evidence of it? For instance, amazing new scientific discoveries.
Limitless free energy? A cure for cancer? We might if the government's motive were the betterment of mankind. The government's motive is control. And just as much as they crave control, they fear loss of control. Knowledge is power, but power does not necessarily confer competence. The people at the top of this program are intellectually very average. They're not capable of making proper use of what's been handed to them, but they have no intention of letting anyone else ever get a chance to solve the puzzle. And let's not forget there's also the real possibility that the government is being manipulated by the extraterrestrials for their own purposes.
You could have released this tape to the news media, but you insisted on being paid for it. Doesn't that cast doubt on your own motives?
Yes, and I was aware of that going in, but that's a cross I'm prepared to bear. I find it disgusting that the most important event in human history is being kept secret simply because certain unimaginative officials have the power to do so. But at the same time, I do see the irony in my own actions. All I can say is, had I had the choice, I would not have insisted on profiting from this revelation, but since by lifting this veil I've endangered not only my career, but possibly my life, I felt the need for some small measure of monetary freedom to deal with any eventualities. And let me say, I could have demanded significantly more money than I did if I had been willing to compromise my anonymity. There have been other whistleblowers who jumped at the chance to become celebrities, which I think casts even more doubt on their motives than some people may be casting on mine.
Do you believe your life is in danger as a result of making this tape public?
I would hope not. I would like to think my government is a little more civilized than that, but at the same time I don't intend to give them the chance to prove me wrong. At any rate, to a certain extent, I'm counting on being disbelieved. Obviously, they would like me to be perceived as a hoaxer. If something were to happen to me, if I should die suddenly in a freak accident, it would obviously lend credence to my story, and I assume they understand that and will act or not act accordingly.
Why should anyone believe this tape is authentic?
Use your own judgment. That's all any of us can do. There's been so much secrecy and disinformation over the last 50 years that it's become impossible to prove anything in the face of official denial. Of course, the flip side is nobody really believes anything the government says.
Did this alien die?
I can't answer that with certainty. I do know the interviews came to an end. Whether the being died or was retired, and I don't mean that in the spy thriller sense of having it killed, I mean retired from the interview process. I just don't know. I'm fairly certain it didn't go home, at least not in the physical sense. But these beings, they don't seem to be very concerned about dying or avoiding death.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe they know what comes after death with more confidence than we do. Maybe there's another vessel waiting for them on the other side.
The other side?
Yes, which may in fact be where they come from in the first place. I've heard the claims that they come from Zeta Reticula or the Pleiades, but it hasn't been established that they come from out there at all. Their saucers may not travel through space as we know it. They may fold in from another dimension, another reality.
You make them sound almost supernatural, like angels or devils.
Supernatural is just a term for aspects of nature we don't understand. For many people, they certainly do serve the functions of both angels and devils, forces we can't comprehend. Have you had enough of me? I think I've earned my money.